Listo, buenas tardes a todos. Hello everyone, I'll do a short introduction in Spanish. If you want, you can use the interpretation button to listen to it in English. Buenas tardes, muchas gracias por estar aquí. Mi nombre es Mariana Botero, soy la actual chair del Spanish Speaking Acousticians. Como saben, organizamos unos eventos virtuales. Muchas gracias, agradecemos que estén aquí. La participación de ustedes nos mantiene activos. Poquita información sobre cómo unirse al capítulo. Enseguida les pongo el link para unirse a nuestro capítulo, para que visiten nuestras redes, para que nos escriban nuestro correo electrónico, un poco sobre cómo unirse y ser miembro de la Acoustical Society. No es necesario ser miembro de la Acoustical Society para ser miembro de nuestro capítulo, así que se pueden inscribir y estar pendientes de todo lo que está pasando y lo que estamos haciendo. Estos son las personas que estamos actualmente en el comité organizador, los que estamos organizando estos eventos. Nuevamente nuestras redes, página web, estamos en Facebook, los eventos los ponemos grabados en YouTube, así que también pueden visitarlos si se han perdido algún evento, nuestro correo electrónico, canal de Discord. El próximo evento, para que se vayan agendando, creemos que va a estar bastante interesante con el profesor Trevor Cox, acerca del uso de modelos a escala para evaluar la acústica prehistórica de Stonehenge. Como mencioné, tenemos la opción de interpretación, entonces no olviden utilizar el canal correcto. Y creo que no es más. Fernando, si nos puedes presentar nuestro presentador del día, a Niels.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm very pleased to introduce my friend, Dr. Niels Adelman-Larsen. Niels is, above all, a very good musician. He started his education in music at the Berklee College of Music, where he obtained a degree in music. And he was also interested in science. So in 1990, he obtained his Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering with a thesis in room acoustics. He's an accomplished musician, not an amateur like most of us, and he toured extensively. He did almost 1,200 concerts as a professional jazz and rock drummer. In 2006, he obtained his Master of Science from the Technical University of Denmark with a thesis on acoustics of pop and rock venues. And in 2010, he made a very important publication because it was the first ever publication that, sorry. Zoom froze, I don't know why.
We can hear you.
Yeah, but I cannot see the screen, sorry.
Oh.
I'll have to, well, I will continue like this. He made a very important publication which studied the acoustic environment suitable for rock and pop venues. There are many publications that analyze the acoustics needed for unamplified music, but Niels wrote the first publication on the acoustics of rock and pop venues. So then we had his book. It appeared in 2014. Here I have it, and I want it signed by the author as soon as possible. And in 2017, he did his PhD in University of Aalborg, with also discussing the reverberation time suitable for venues that present amplified music. And he was part of the committee that put together the ISO 23591 standard, which is called Acoustic Quality Criteria for Musical Rehearsal Rooms and Spaces. He's the director of Flex Acoustics, and he holds 4 patents within variable acoustic technologies. So that being said, I leave you with Niels. I will check what is going on with my Zoom. I have a glitch, but well, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Fernando, for a great introduction here, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very thrilled to be part of this, and thanks everyone for listening in, and I hope we'll have a good hour here together. It's almost like being back in music again with all these listeners, the whole audience in front. This is wonderful, and I just discussed with Fernando that you're all welcome to throw in a question at any time if you want to have something deeper explained. Without further introduction of myself, because that has already been done so fine by Fernando, I'll just like to share my video, my PowerPoint presentation here. Do you see it?
Yes, all good.
Good. All good. Wonderful. So, wonderful. Thank you. So, as explained, I will be talking about reverberation time curves suitable for pop and rock music concert halls. And the reason why I say reverberation time curves and not just reverberation time is that it's so important, you know, to acknowledge that there are a reverberation time for each octave band, and this plays a super crucial role in acoustics for amplified music. So it's just to stress that point that I write curve here. And I want also to talk a little bit about the ISO standard that Fernando also talked about, which is called Acoustic Quality Criteria for Music Rehearsal Rooms and Music Spaces. And it is seen here actually the curves, the tolerance fields within 3 different types of music are seen here in the green, the blue, and the red field. As we see, we have the volume of the hall, a venue on the x-axis, and the reverberation time of the y-axis. And as many of you might know, different types of music requires different reverberation times in a room for the music to sound ideal. And so I can just shortly explain here that the green field is what I'm then an expert in, you can say, and the reason why I was part of the ISO committee is that I've done this research that Fernando talked about, which has led to this green field, which is the ideal reverberation time for pop and rock concerts or amplified music. The blue field is acoustic loud music, and the red field is acoustic soft music, such as choir or chamber music, where the blue field would maybe contain some horns, which is louder. So I can really recommend this ISO standard in case you don't know about it yet. Just jump online and buy it. It has some wonderful things in it. And also in that ISO standard, there is a tolerance field in terms of frequency. So this is the tolerance field for the pop and rock music reverberation time. So you can see you have found your reverberation time in this, your ideal. You are gonna make a concert hall 3,000 cubic meters, and you will then see that you would like a reverberation time of maybe 1 second, right? According to this. And then with the tolerance field, you can then have some tolerances around that 1 second. And the dotted line here is for the bigger venues, a recital hall, for instance. And you can see we allow a longer reverberation time at higher frequencies. And we see also that it's important to control the low frequency reverberation at 125 hertz, whereas it can actually get a little bit higher at 63 hertz, right? So this recommendation in this ISO standard is what I'm going to talk about. Why did we find these values? Why did in my research, how did I find this? So I'd like to divide this talk into 2 sections. First, I'm gonna talk about the acoustic and electroacoustic backgrounds that can be brought into play, which is kind of the reasoning why do we find these tolerance fields. And then the second section, which is probably 12 or 15 minutes from now, is the empirical background. So my own investigations that led to the values you just saw in the ISO standard. So first of all, what do we have? We have a rock band on stage, right? And we know it's loud, and there's amplifiers and electric guitars, bass guitars, and actually a rock band is very loud in the 125 hertz octave band. Is the band I've circled in here with the red circle here, and you can see which instruments are playing down there. There's the electric guitar with the lowest string of 80 hertz. The male vocal is down in that frequency range. Of course, the bass guitar, the bass drum, the drums, all the drums, the keyboards even are playing in that octave band. And as you can see, the keyboard also extends down in the bass domain, so in the 63 hertz band. But you can also see that there's not many other instruments down there in that domain. And if the keyboard player dares to play something in that octave band, the bass player will immediately say, "Get out of my octave band. You are disturbing my bass line here." So the 63 hertz band is not that active rhythmically than the 125 hertz octave band, and it's not as loud either. And we shall see that that's an important reason why we can allow a longer reverberation time in the 63 hertz band. So also, here's an example of 7 different music venues that present rock music here in Denmark. You can see how different they are. Size-wise, they're not very different. So you can see which challenge it would be to play the same concert in such different reverberation time venues. And you can also see that some of the venues, for instance, the orange one here is a nice example, which is called Viften. So the one that rises towards 2.5 seconds at 63 hertz. You can see how a note played, let's say in the 125 hertz band. Well, that could be either the male vocal, the guitar, the bass, whatever. Well, the hall is going to hold on to that note for a long time, actually for 2 seconds. We can see the reverberation time of the orange line is 2 seconds at 125 hertz. So what if there's another note from another instrument or some other instrument being played immediately after this one? It's very busy. Rock music is rhythmically super active. It's syncopated, a lot of rhythm. So can you imagine what happens when all these notes are played soon after each other, and the hall keeps holding on to that sound happening down there? It'll get super muddy and unintelligible, because not only will the sounds there be unintelligible because of all this stuff happening, and one sound is not done ringing out before the next one starts, but also all that sound down there will upward mask higher frequency sounds. So everything else going on in the band, all the overtones of all the instruments happening at higher frequencies than 125 will also be disturbed, and so you lose intelligibility, and we'll get to a situation as known as muddy sound, right? From sound engineers and musicians out there in the whole world. So we have a very strong reduction of, let's call it, music intelligibility, similar as speech intelligibility, but we won't really understand what is being played. And so that's when we as audiences kind of go to the bar and order a beer, because well, you know, forget about this music. We don't really understand it, and we are not conscious about that often as an audience. We just kind of perceive that, well, it's not super interesting, let's go and have a beer instead. And we want to avoid that situation, of course, because we all want to have a great evening out there. We've paid the tickets, musicians are excited about playing there, we want to have a great evening. So I'll show that a lot of that situation stems from this long reverberation time in the 125 hertz octave band. But these are the causes, right? And here we see kind of a music venue from above, right? So in the upper section of this white rectangle, you have the stage, you have a lot of instruments there. You have a PA system, the two boxes to the left and right. Maybe you even have some delay speakers. You have the PA bass speakers, the subwoofers. You have a mixer board somewhere out there in the middle of the audience with the sound engineer mixing the instruments to get a great sounding PA system sound. But we also know that the reflections from the hall will shoot back and we'll have this long reverberation if they're not absorbed by means of absorption material in the right frequencies on ceiling and walls. And I've kind of made these circles out here about the place where the mixer board is placed, and that is it's supposed to show the critical distance, which is the distance at which the direct sound from the loudspeakers is as loud as the reflected sound from all the surfaces. So somewhere out there in the audience, those two ingredients of the total sound impression are equally loud, right? The direct sound and the reflected sound. And that is the critical distance. And that's probably going to vary a lot according to frequency. But let's look into that. So we have two more factors working against us when it comes to critical distance, because many of you might know the formula, which is shown here. R is the critical distance. And the big Q under the square root is the directivity of the loudspeakers. And you may know that high frequencies have a very high directivity. So maybe the Q is 10 at high frequencies, and at low frequencies it's maybe 2. And so that means that we have a strong directivity of the sound. The sound shoots out of the PA system speakers down towards the audience. And you can see on the diagram to the right, you can see the absorption curves of an audience. And the upper curve is a standing audience. They absorb even more than a seated audience, of course. And you can see how above 500 hertz, they absorb almost everything. So we have a situation where the PA speakers direct the high frequency sound above 500 hertz directly down to the audience, who then absorbs everything. So do you think there's going to be a problem with the 500 hertz sound and above in terms of too long reverberation and missing intelligibility? I don't think so. That it would be illogical if that would be the case. However, we have for low frequencies, as I said, the Q is low. So we're going to have a short critical distance. A lot of audiences will have muddy sound due to lack of directivity in the loudspeakers. Of course, these great loudspeaker companies who have made amazing sound systems for many years now, they try and direct the low frequency sound with sub speakers that can direct more the low frequency sound. Maybe we can get to a higher number, maybe 3 or 4, but it's still not 10 as the high frequency directivity number, right? So, and as you see, the audience do not absorb a lot of 125 hertz sound either. So those two factors combined, so the sound, the bass sound emerges from the sub speakers and the loudspeakers in almost all directions. So a lot of reverberation will be created from all surfaces. Reflections will, you know, add up and adding to a longer reverberation and adding to a stronger reverberation. So the sound level of the reverberation becomes very loud, and so masking is happening, right? So that's the situation we're working with in amplified music, and this is kind of this. We cannot really do anything more than what we're already doing. We can have, as you can see in the equation, the T is the reverberation time, and the only way we can repair on this is having a short T, short reverberation time at those frequencies which are bothering us. So that would be the low frequencies, right? So that already tells us we need to have a short reverberation time at low frequencies. And I made this fun diagram here where we see what must the reverberation time in the empty hall be at various octave bands to render a constant critical distance over frequency when the hall is full. So you can see, then we should design a hall which in the empty condition would have these reverberation times, which is completely absurd, of course. And I know nobody says that it would be wonderful with a constant critical distance in a hall. That's not necessarily what we're aiming for, but I'm just showing this diagram because it really shows what we are up against in terms of reverberation time in the venue to start out with. Okay, so that was a lot about the low frequencies, but who says what is the medium reverberation time? Well, let's look into the high frequency reverberation. And there's an interesting study here from the guys up in Aalto University in Finland. They checked out what happens during a crescendo in a symphonic orchestra, and also in any other musical instrument, almost. Well, the thing is that the louder you play on an instrument, the more loud does the frequencies above 2 kilohertz get. So as you can see from this diagram, maybe this is the increase of level, right, in decibels up the y-axis, and we have the frequency on the x-axis, and you can see how much the frequencies above 2K they increase twice as much as the frequencies below, at least during a crescendo. So I'd say that any great musician uses a lot of dynamics in his playing to make great music, to make music very engaging for the listener and to evoke feelings in the listener and the musician himself. Dynamics is maybe it's just an incredibly important ingredient in music. And so you can see here is a diagram that shows the same thing, but for various instruments. And I can say I used to be a drummer, and playing a crescendo in any rock band. All of you will recognize this if you play in a rock band. Tony Hoover, you are a rock guitarist. You'll know that the drummer he will probably ease his hi-hat, loosen the grip on it, so it becomes more and more high frequent, right? Because it becomes louder and louder. And at the end, he'll maybe reach for the right cymbal to create even more high frequency sound. And that's because he want to blend in with all the other guys who are playing louder and louder and also increasing their 2 kilohertz plus sound, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that and that's what I later found when I asked a lot of musicians and sound engineers which halls they like, and they say that they disliked halls which were too dead at high frequencies because it was like hitting a pillow, one of them said. And hitting a pillow is like doing a lot of effort without something coming back. And so this musician felt, and I think we all do, but he was just very elaborate about putting words on it. He just had this feeling. He was trying to express himself, but and he's doing a lot of dynamics, but nothing is coming out of it. So musicians usually refer to a hall which is too dead at high frequencies as a dull experience to play in. So that is one reason why the high frequency reverberation shouldn't be too low, shouldn't be low at all, actually, in a rock venue. I'm not talking about small rock clubs where the acoustic level from just the instruments is going to be too loud in that little room. I'm talking about venues above maybe 2,000 cubic meters where PA system is predominantly what creates the soundscape out there in the venue. There we want the reverberation. Of course, in a very small room, the amplification by the hall itself, the G, you can say, is making the high frequencies too loud in a little room. So other factors why we don't want RT at high frequencies to be low is that, and I experienced this because we have this one hall in Denmark which is super dead at high frequencies, and when the audience are clapping and cheering, we barely hear them on stage. It's a numb kind of feeling, and it's like watching an aquarium. You know, you see these people, it's like fish, and you can't hear them. It's like watching an aquarium, and it's an alienating thing for a musician to not have that contact with the audience. You really play for them. They have paid tickets to come and hear you, and now you don't hear them. It's a weird situation. So you can imagine how a longer reverberation time at higher frequencies would kind of acoustically amplify their cheering and clapping. And the same thing goes for the audience, because they can't hear the other audiences clapping and cheering. So for them too, it becomes a little bit dull, because you go to a concert to experience a social event. Otherwise, you could just stay at home with your headphones on, you know, and maybe watch a live concert on the video. But we go out and we are social creatures, and we want to experience this vivacity. And that's why we don't want to have a too low reverberation time at high frequencies, even in the venues for amplified music. Okay, so now we're just kind of missing out on the 63 hertz band. And the 63 hertz band is different. You remember how I said there's just the bass and the bass drum playing in that octave band, and that doesn't become very busy and not quite as loud as the 125 hertz octave band. Well, here's a Dutch investigation on how loud are the different bands, and you can see here are some as much more modern subgenres of amplified music. So not pop and rock music. You can see the pop is the Turkish. Is that what it's called? Turkish. This bluish line here. Whereas house music and dance, you know, whatever they're called, techno music, is louder in the 63 hertz band and also in the 125 hertz band. But you can see even those genres are louder in the 125 hertz band than in the 63 hertz band. So it is really important to keep the 125 hertz band very controlled RT wise in a rock venue. Okay, how am I doing on time here? Do I have 5 minutes to tell
Yeah,
the
you're doing great.
investigation?
You
Okay,
can take 10 more minutes and then we'll
good.
have some time for questions.
Thank you. Okay, so I mean, all these things I just talked about is something I've kind of realized and found in you know, in books and whatever, and gathered along the way while doing these investigations too, because as we know, it's not enough to kind of have this loose kind of substantiating facts. You need as much evidence as possible to make something solid in research, right? The more facts you can have pointing, or the more substantiating material you can have that point in a given direction, the more certain we are that this can be used in science. This is a scientific fact, right? So, I went out to gather some, as we do in acoustics. We ask expert listeners, what do you think about this and that? And of course, here I was asking. I have a big network among professional musicians in Denmark, and so I asked a lot of musicians and sound engineers back in 2005 already, and that about what they thought about 20 venues, rock venues, which are used all the time in Denmark. And I asked the most active musicians and sound engineers and the best in Denmark about what they thought about those 20 venues. And that's the #1 paper, which came out as a JASA paper in 2010, and that Fernando referred to. That's an important one because it's kind of the first and only one, which is a very big investigation. As a matter of fact, I received 500 completed questionnaire forms. That's a very, very high number. It's twice as much as Michael Barron got on his paper from '89 on 20 venues for classical music. And so it just makes the whole case here very solid. And the statistics are very solid and robust, and that's just so great. And you can see here the 20 venues with the volume out the x-axis and the reverberation time as an average from 125 to 2K up the y-axis. And you can see the 20 dots are the 20 venues, and some dots are big and some dots are small, and that's because we chose to show this way which ones are the highest rated halls, and the highest rated halls are the biggest dots. So we were able to just make this best fit line among the, I think it was 6 best halls or something. We gave double weight on the very best 4 halls, so that would have an even bigger impact. And of course, we just left out the 10 worst halls from this best fit line. So this line is pretty much what is being used when you want to design a venue for pop and rock music, in terms of reverberation time. And it's also this line which is used as the green field we saw before in the ISO standard, more or less. And there's a funny thing here which shows, if you see 1500 cubic meters, so a quite small hole, which is called stars, which has an absurdly low reverberation time. It's just completely absorptive at all frequencies on all surfaces, more or less. And it came out as the favorite hall among sound engineers, but only hall number 10 out of 20 among musicians. And that already gives us a hint that it mustn't be too dead at high frequencies. That's the hall this guitarist talked about. It's like hitting a pillow, and you can see why now. Okay, so another important thing that came out of that study, which is yeah, which is super important, is actually a scientific evidence that the best rated halls have a lower value of reverberation time in the 3 lowest octave bands. So I just took the 10 worst venues and took the average reverberation time. That's the upper line, and the lower line is the average reverberation time of the 10 best venues. But I, of course, had to divide by volume to kind of take out the effect that bigger halls can have longer reverberation times and should have longer reverberation times. So just divided the volume. That's why the y-axis looks a little funny here. But you can see that the variances do not overlap in the 3 lowest octave bands. So the variances at the 3 octave bands do not overlap, and so that gives us a significant result in statistics, and that's what makes it a solid scientific proof. So that is a scientific proof that we gotta have a low value of reverberation time in those 3 octave bands. But we also see that even in the best halls, we have a slightly longer reverberation time at 63 Hz, right? And we also see that we have a slightly longer reverberation time at 2K. Now that's super interesting, isn't it? Because that's what we just talked about earlier. And we kind of substantiated why that could be the fact. And here we see it wouldn't have to be this way, because it's just amazing that these venues present this kind of reverberation time curve. It's a little bit lucky, but it's still also just amazing that this is the result we get here. So that was like the main findings in this super important paper from 2010 in JASA. And then I made another paper in 2017. And I just compared 2 different venues here, because I wanted to substantiate further this high frequency thing. And of course, the first thing you probably see is this long reverberation time at 63 Hz, but let's wait discussing that. So we just have 2 different venues. They're the same size. They have approximately the same reverberation time at 125 Hz, but one has no chorus absorption at all. It's the one with the long reverberation time at higher frequencies, whereas the other one has chorus absorption all over the ceiling. And sure enough, the upper line venue is much more preferred by musicians than the lower line venue. The sound engineers, they like both venues. They didn't have a preference between these 2. They'll get around on their mixer board and make this stuff sound great. But this is just another substantiation that the high frequencies shouldn't be too low. I did not get a significant result on this because there were too few musicians answering, because it was, yeah, it's not the most famous venues in Denmark, but they are very, very used. And I've played in, actually I haven't played in any of them, but anyway, so this is a super this is just a nice substantiation of the high frequency thing. And again, oh yeah, as I said, the 63 Hz. And so what is that super disturbing in those 2 venues? No, it's not. It's maybe a little bit disturbing in the one with the low reverberation time at high frequencies. And this is interesting because that shows that you can maybe kind of mask things that does sound good, that may be a little bit reverberant in the 63 Hz band. You can maybe mask that with some high frequency reverberation. That's a super interesting thing. And that's also a reason why we don't want to lower the reverberation time at high frequencies too much. Anyway, I should say that, okay, it looks dramatic, the 63 Hz band octave reverberation, but just check out that at 80 Hz, it's not that high. It's 1.2 seconds. And at 63 Hz, now we're talking 3rd octave bands, right? So the 50 Hz 3rd octave band can be much longer than the 125 hertz third octave band. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm saying that towards very low frequencies, you can have a pretty long reverberation time, but at 80 hertz, you wouldn't want it to be too long. You wouldn't want to have 2 seconds at 80 hertz. I don't think that would cause a problem. All right. That's because our hearing rolls off a lot towards those very low frequencies. Okay, so just all in all, we have a situation where if we look on the tolerance field, just more like in loose terms, you can say that here you see like a figure that kind of shows what is the tolerance field in terms of frequency bands for the reverberation time. So if 1 second is the one we shoot for in our ISO standard or in our diagram here from the JASA paper or from my book, well, if that's factor 1, then you can have some tolerances around those frequencies, and that'll actually, you can also just have a plain one, and so of course it's interesting to know, is this with or without an audience? And this is actually thought to be without an audience, but I have a strong feeling that even a hall with the audience have a longer reverberation time at high frequencies. And I actually prove that, not scientifically. This is my book, by the way. It's nice. Go and get it if you don't have it. There's a lot more substantiation, and a lot of venues are presented here. 75 venues are presented from all over Europe. And so you can have good ideas about how to design venues from this book. Venues from the small hip rock club in Milan to the O2 Arena in London, they are all in there. And I went out and measured them all. I took a trip in a camping car for 3 months and drove 16,000 kilometers and measured all those venues. That was fun and hard work. Anyway, so here's a situation where, in many venues we need to play different types of music, as you saw. As we know, you then need to go from the one field, the ISO standard, maybe the blue or the red field for an acoustic concert, to the green field, and we know this has to be done in low frequencies as well. And the black diagram here shows a variable acoustic system in a hall, where I think this is what we really want. And as you can see, the lower curve is the ideal rock curve, right? We have a controlled reverberation time at 125, 250, and pretty controlled at 63. And then we have a longer reverberation time at higher frequencies. And this is a hall with upholstered seats. So it will not be very different when you have an audience sitting there. So I don't think that even with a full audience, you will have a lower reverberation time at high frequencies. And this hall sounds amazing for rock concerts, and it's some people's favorite hall. And that's how I make a living. It's from inventing and producing and selling these variable acoustic systems. So I hope you will take just a second and look into the homepage of my company here, Flex Acoustics. Without that, I cannot, I wouldn't be making a living. So I hope it's okay that I mentioned this. But anyway, this curve shows exactly what we're looking for when we are varying the reverberation time in a venue. Okay, thank you. That's all for me. Questions?
Thank you very much, Niels. Thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Fernando.
Yeah, I think we
Pleasure.
have a question here.
Okay.
And my Zoom is very glitchy, but I'll try to read. How to treat a muddy room from the front of house room when you cannot influence the acoustics of the space, of the place, or the space. I cannot read very well.
Unfortunately, we cannot do that. So unfortunately, we cannot make a muddy room sound good without acoustic implementation of some absorption material. Sorry, that's the short answer. Did I understand the question right?
I'll try to read it again. Let's see if that is correct. How to treat a muddy room from the front of house room when you cannot influence the acoustics of the place.
Yeah,
that was the question. Yeah,
I understand it as well, what can you do? The only thing you can do is to lower the level of the bass frequencies, and then at some point you will discover that it's no longer a rock concert because there's no bass left, and and it'll sound like. But that's the best thing you can do. Yeah, there's also some tricks that sound engineers use. Maybe I heard Metallica here in a Danish venue, and they took out the whole bass guitar. They took out from the mix. They took out the bass guitar, and then there was just a super loud kick drum, which kind of gave all the physical sensation that you want in a rock concert. And so it was a weird situation, but it was the best thing he could do in that venue. Of course, that's terrible. You know, the bass player could have stayed at home. It's crazy.
I do have a follow-up question on that. That is, if you don't have access to a variable acoustic system, which you produce and sell, it seems that the requirements for absorption in the venue are kind of, sort of, I would say, contradictory, or because if you use porous absorption, it mainly absorbs on the high frequencies, and perhaps for the 125 hertz, you should have some kind of perhaps Helmholtz absorber, something tuned to those frequencies. Is there any way that in a venue that must be used and without entering in, or incorporating a very super expensive solution, what would be your recommendations to treat a space so that you can get good response for rock and pop music?
Yeah, I mean, any pop and rock venue needs to have this trait. You don't have to vary the acoustics in there. You just have to one fixed reverberation time at all times, and it's not difficult to make. You can still use porous absorbers, but maybe you want to use it far away from where the sound is gonna hit the ears of the listeners, because the high frequency sound is a far away, so that, like, if it's a very high ceiling, the high frequencies would be dampened so much from the air absorption on the way down. So that would be a good place to place the porous absorption. But you can use plate absorbers as a membrane absorption is great. When I do a rock venue early on, when I was kind of a consultant and did acoustics for spaces for rock venues, I would often make a floor, a wooden floor on joists with mineral wool in, and so that would take care of a lot of 63 hertz bands. And it's okay to use porous absorption if there's a high ceiling, but you can use, the perforated gypsum board with a thick mineral wool on top of that, and a cavity still, a large cavity up towards the reflective surface. I think that's a very good product, because that rolls off a little bit at high frequencies. The absorption coefficient rolls off high frequencies, so you get a little bit automatically this higher reverberation time at high frequencies. Or any kind of boards, wooden boards that are perforated. And as I said, membrane absorption is super nice, because you won't have any high frequency absorption at all. And so you can mix in a little bit these different types of absorption materials, and you'll get it's not expensive. None of these materials are expensive, and so you can make a great sounding rock venue for very little money. I mean, it's not very little, but it's not like we should do that.
Thank you, Niels.
Yeah.
That makes me wonder, I thought you were going to mention the constellation or acoustic enhancement reverberation systems that, you know, you can start with a drier room and make it more reverberant if you want it. Is that something worth considering for these kinds of music?
No, is the short answer, because that's when you don't want to use the artificial reverberation. You would want to use that in a space that cannot create long enough reverberation by itself. That's when you want to have a longer reverberation time, and you could consider such a solution.
So very small venues.
No, also,
Also big ones?
if yeah, I mean, if there's a low ceiling, I guess. If the ceiling is not high enough to create that very long reverberation, you might shoot for a certain type of music.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you.
Mm.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes, we have one from Tony Hoover.
Okay, Tony. How you doing? Tony Hoover. Oh, thank you.
Your
Yeah,
flex inflatable
thank you.
absorbers are a great approach for absorbing primarily low frequencies. Can you discuss experiences with venues that incorporated those?
That's a very kind answer. Thank you. I don't even have in my presentation here any. That just shows how nerdy I am. That I didn't think that I would get a question like that. That's wonderful. Okay, can I just take up a little presentation here, which shows this inflatable membrane absorber, which is a fun little invention.
Please.
Thank you. Where is that? It's not here. Here. Yeah. Where would I have that? I'll try here. Well, you know, that's a fun. It's a fun product, which it's just very thin plastic membranes, which are then inflated, and then of course you would have a membrane absorber once you have inflated this. If you think about it, I mean, it took me a long time to figure out that how to make a variable membrane absorber, but that was the way to do it. So you could inflate and deflate this product, and you would then have. Let me see if I have something here. Then you would be able to vary the acoustics in halls. Here's actually something. Sorry for taking a little bit of time for this. So here you see that's the Eurovision Song Contest in 2014, and that was held in a shipyard where they used to build ships. And here you see these tubes. They're 50 meters long and almost 2 meters in diameter. So they are huge, but they act as membrane. They will rattle when the music is playing because the sound pressure on the outside is different from the sound pressure on the inside, and that'll make the membrane vibrate, right? And when sound makes something vibrate, it means that sound energy is transformed into vibrational energy, which is then transformed into heat. So we get rid of sound, we get rid of reverberation. And that's a wonderful product for very large venues. Here you see vertical. And that was the impact we did in terms of reverberation time. I mean, that was pretty amazing. We got from 11.5 seconds at 125 to 4 seconds. They also used molten curtains, which doesn't take a lot of low frequencies. But all in all, this is Amsterdam Arena, where they're used every time there's a concert since 2015. That's 15 times a year. So the biggest rock stars, they are performing with this stuff. Here you see it. They're taken up by hoists, I think, every time they have a concert. It's a fun product. It's just to say that you know, when you do variable acoustics, we don't want to do the drapes. So I'm sorry, I shouldn't maybe say that, but I that's a challenge using drapes, right? Because it just absorbs the same frequencies as the audiences. Here's a typical absorption coefficient of a drape, and you see to the right is the absorption coefficient of the audience. So you don't want to do the same thing as the audience. You want to do the opposite, right? As we talked about. So yeah, that was a little bit about the tubes. Thank you for that question. There's another question there?
There is another question from David.
Yeah.
In principle,
I can read it if you want to.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a question by Dave Conant. Says, in principle, I discovered in graduate school long ago that one could fill your flex membranes with high molecular weight fluorocarbon gas, a Freon variation, and by that increase the reverberation time of the space because the speed of sound in that gas was far slower than in typical air.
That's amazing. So we could increase. That's very funny and potentially lethal if the gas comes out of the container. Or we all will have these Donald Duck voices, right? When we speak, the singer will like sing 2 octaves above what he's used to because it's one of them is leaking, right? And this gas gets into his lungs. That would be a super fun. I think this is a fun contribution to the slightly funny idea of having, you know, membranes in the ceiling.
And you can also deplete the ozone layer with fluorocarbon.
That is funny. and the funny thing was when I patented this, we ran into a German guy who had been exactly doing that. He was trying to make air-filled membranes in the engine, around the engine of a car. He wanted to lower the noise level inside the car from having these things around the engine, and he would fill them with a specific, I think, more heavy gas, so that would make the sound reduction even bigger. So it's not that off.
Are these tubes tuned, Niels, or are they inflated to a fixed?
That's a good question. I mean, that's a good question because the tubes, the big just circular tubes, they're not really tuned, you can say. But but of course they are as much as I can. But the slightly different product, which is called the AcouFlex, they are kind of sausage, cocktail sausage shaped, and they are tuned. And as you know, if you play, you know, if you put a ruler over the edge of a table and play it like that, brr, 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 you have different sounds, you know, and the same goes for any membrane, that it's the dimensions that gives the resonance frequencies, and so here we are tuning the length to get to 125 hertz, and so yes, that product is tuned.
Right.
But I'll also say that I have just an amazing, I'm sorry, but I'm totally thrilled about about a new product that I'm releasing very soon, and it's just such a wonderful variable acoustics product, which is, I mean, you can't see it when it's off, it's invisible, and when it's on, it looks still very, very nice. And I'm looking forward to disclosing it soon, but not yet. But I have this other product that you saw it's called the Evoke, which I showed before. Do you see this? Do you see my screen?
We're still seeing the PDF, the Norwegian standards.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll just share another one for anybody interested. I hope this is okay, and you're more than welcome to ask any question related to my talk, because this is slightly out of it. Here you see the same photos. This is also a totally wonderful product, and it sounds amazing because we're doing the right things. It's called the Evoke, and it does exactly what we want it to do. You know, absorb 125 and 250 most of all, some 63, but not very much 2K, 4K, and it just sounds amazing. And it's like, okay, when you really do everything you have found out you need to do, then you get this sound you always wanted. So now you talked about the electronic reverberation systems before, and I feel sometimes that is turning the whole thing upside down, I have to say. And I think they have become more popular because the people didn't really, really take up the fight with doing the right things with their variable acoustics. And when you do it, you are less in need of something electronic. But as I said, there's still a good reason for electronic acoustics, which is if your ceiling is not high enough and you really want to get to those 3 seconds reverberation or something, then that is a wonderful solution.
Do you have any other questions, Mariana? Are you seeing anything?
I'm not seeing anybody else. I was going to relaunch the poll that I launched at the beginning so we can get a few more answers. We had a few more people joined after. So I would like to collect a few more answers if possible while we wait for some questions too. Otherwise, I think we'll be good. Great. Thank you so much, those who are answering this. This is helpful. I'll share the results in a minute.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it.
Do you want to read them, Mariana?
Yes, I wanted to enlarge the list. I read the list earlier. I'm just adding Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Colombia, Mexico. Great presentation. Thank you very much. California, Bolivia, Colombia, Costa Rica, Argentina, Mexico. So good membership in South America.
Amazing.
I would say split between researchers in process and non-researchers, and a good mix of only Spanish speakers versus either language being okay. We got another question from Tony.
Oh yeah, Tony.
Yeah, he says that note that the flex tubes can also provide some high frequency diffusion.
Yeah, true. That's also a reason why in a music school we have put that in the ceiling, and it's not a very big room. It's 1,000 cubic meters. And it just sounds incredibly nice because the ceiling is only 6 meters and you have these guys hanging down a meter. So you really hear that high frequency diffusion from that diffuse surface. And it's just an incredibly nice sound that it's so soft in the high frequencies. Thank you, Tony. That's a good point.
Great. I think that's it. We can close out. This was really, really great, Niels. We really appreciate you, your presentation, all the information.
Thank you so much. It's been a huge pleasure. I would want to thank all the 30 of you that are hanging on here. It's been a wonderful experience, and thanks especially to Fernando for inviting. It's one of a kind.
I think we'll be seeing you soon in Athens.
We will.
I'll have this autograph by the author.
But can I see it again, please?
It's the first edition. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. You know, I'll bring this one for you signed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Until next time.
Until next time. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Take care.